Hello, my name is Steve Evans. I'm with Healing Streams Ministry, and with me in the studio is Angela McCurdy. We're here to talk with you today about why our hearts matter where our health is concerned. We've been on a journey of discovery and sharing it with you now for several sessions, talking about that mind-body connection that science has been investigating for at least the last 50 years, and a mountain of evidence is showing us now that the negative emotions that we carry stress our bodies, and that stress coming into our lives is now breaking our bodies down. A host of incurable diseases, maybe as many as 80%, are linked with the stress levels that we carry inside of us. And so this is a message for just about everybody. I hope you would listen in as we talk about how negative emotions and the stress that they bring affects our physical bodies in the first part of this broadcast, and in the second part of our broadcast, how we can begin to come out of the grip of those negative emotions. There's a process of turning away from them and letting go that the Bible really gives us a lot of helpful information on. And so the first thing we want to do is again take that journey down to look at the problem before we look at the answer. And for that I want to read to you from a book that is called In His Own Image. It's written by a pastor, a counselor in Alaska. His name is Art Mathias. He's been seeing a lot of people get well through a pathway that science teaches us is there for everybody. It's the mending of our hearts. Mm-hmm. Have you had the opportunity to read some of Art Mathias's books?
I have a couple of his books, and he definitely knows how to go into the issues of your heart and show that connection between the mind-body connection.
He has amazing testimonies in there
Yes,
of people that have gotten well. We have some pretty amazing testimonies here in Savannah, but not nearly as many as Art Mathias has, because he's been at this longer. It's inevitable that we're going to have so many glorious testimonies of people getting set free by learning how to deal with the issue in their heart rather than treating it outwardly. And not that we're asking anybody to abandon medicine, but we're asking people to look at their hearts so that we can get free of the stress, which is fun anyway.
Oh, it's really a lot of fun when you recognize that what I think is affecting me internally. Then from an expense standpoint, that's easy to fix.
Yes, it is.
I'm not going to have to take my checkbook out for that. I'm going to have to go into the Word and find out what the connection is, and it's wonderful.
Well, that's right. If you've got stressors in your life like these things, what creates, these are all emotions that create an alarm reaction in us, and that alarm reaction is the general adaptation syndrome. When we see something that disturbs us or upsets us or throws us into the least little bit of fear, something goes off inside our body that releases chemicals, and Angela will talk about that process in a minute, that causes us either to have strength and energy for flight or fight. And we were taught that, if you'll remember, back in elementary school, probably. But what actually is going on in addition to that initial impulse is that there are all kinds of negative emotions that bring about that same stress response in our body. Things like unforgiveness, resentment, retaliation and anger, hatred and violence, guilt, shame and sorrow, regret, loneliness, fears, grief, performance orientation, self-hatred and being rejecting of others or fearing rejection, jealousy and envy and covetousness and gossip and slander. Wow. That's quite a laundry list of negative emotions, and all of them have this in common. They can produce a stress response in our body if we don't learn the way of carrying the negative emotions into the peace of Christ so that they can be traded back in for trust and confidence in God and acceptance of what we need to be about and who we are.
You know, one of the things we're going to talk about a little later in the show is recognition. And first you have to learn to recognize how you respond to stress. It can be through what they say here in this article, increased heart rate. Your blood pumps around the body to get oxygen and sugar to the cells that you will need to use to survive. Symptoms can be associated with the stress response might include rapid or irregular heartbeats. Another thing you need to be aware of is your breathing becomes more rapid. Stress hormones are released. Your blood pressure can go up. Muscles that you would use to fight or flee might often become tight until they're released by relaxation. You may get a pain in your neck, tension headaches, a tight jaw, neck or shoulder pain. There's also changes in the blood flow circulation. Blood is directed toward the brain and major muscles used for survival. Blood is directed away from the surface and the skins in the hand and the feet. So you need to understand that symptoms can be associated with stress response might include high blood pressure, cold hands and feet, upset stomach, migraine headaches,
yeah.
on. And also your senses are heightened, which is a survival mode that you go into as well. And this is one I'm really akin to at the moment because of menopause, but you perspire and sweat to cool the body's increased metabolism down, which I had never even associated with, and I've had that happen to me before years ago when I was in the throes of depression.
Well, some of these things you're mentioning, I think all of us
Yes.
have experienced those
Yes.
cold hands or that butterfly feeling, the surge of adrenaline when perhaps you have to speak in public, something like that, and the stress comes on you.
Or you're sitting in
anxiety
front
is
of a
there.
TV camera when it's not the normal thing to do.
Yeah, but it's so warm in the studio, I don't have cold hands right now. But at any rate, that if we learn to see what our body is doing, that can give us an idea that we're beginning to experience stress.
Yes, it is.
But often enough, we know that we're experiencing stress. And what we don't realize is what it's doing to our bodies. And so you've got quite a number of things on your list that stress can do to your bodies. I've also got a study here showing what stress can do to weaken the immune system. If you listen to this study that was done back from 1982 to 1992, some pioneer researchers studied medical students. And what they found out, among other things, was that the students' immunity went down every year under the simple stress of a 3-day exam. Now, I took a 4-day exam getting out of seminary, and I can tell you that was not simple stress. But there is a peace that can find us even in those times when we're under a 3-day exam. But they saw the test takers had fewer natural killer cells. Now, that's important because killer cells fight tumors. You're a linkage
Yes.
with cancer right there and stress pulling the immune system down. And the killer cells fight viral infections. These students under stress almost stopped producing immunity-boosting gamma interferon and infection-fighting T cells and responded only weakly to stimulation. And so here are students, medical students, who under the stress of 3 days of testing are having this enormous depressive effect upon their immune system. Another study showed that stress of any significant duration, from a few days to a few months or years as happens in real life, all aspects of immunity can go downhill. Thus, long-term or chronic stress through too much wear and tear can ravage the immune system. This is one of the reasons why in our last study we were saying that depression has an effect upon cancer because of it pulling the immune system down. But the negative emotions that stress us, the anxiety that can come in, affects us physically in so many different ways.
I've lived under stress for so many years that I didn't know I was under stress. And it really did affect my body. I had arthritis and flame in my feet because of the stress. I had an inability to sleep properly. My muscles began to burn. And I never understood the correlation between the two and how it physically could affect me and emotion could affect my body.
Well, I'm going to tell a story right here that didn't occur to me to talk about on television, but my wife and I were missionaries in Honduras. And when you said that you lived under it for a number of years, you probably were not so aware of it. You knew something was going on, but folks, we get used to what we live with.
That's right.
That's the principle of a blanketing, kind of the darkening of our understanding. So we're just not as aware. We don't fight back and push back against the little invaders. My wife and I lived in Honduras in the city, and roaches were very prevalent there. And one of our neighbors came in with those small German variety roaches all over his clothing and sat in our house. Now, my wife could not abide a roach, and it was all I could do as they were jumping off of him onto the floor to keep from stepping on them, but I didn't want to embarrass him, so we just let him shed his roaches, and he himself would, sometimes he'd notice one and he'd brush it, but he was literally crawling with roaches and didn't seem to be bothered by it or notice it. Now, just imagine how the negative emotions...
I'm sorry, I'm a little awe right now. now.
artist. Now just imagine how the negative emotions, we learn to live with things like anxiety and worry and stress and fear and critical thoughts about other people and feelings of envy and jealousy that may run throughout the day like strains of emotion or like those little critters crawling around. And unless we learn the way to come out of them, they are peace robbers and they're joy robbers. Because the truth is, when the negative emotions come in, the peace and the joy, the bright hope that are meant to be there, go out by another pathway. And so when we talk about negative emotions being stressors, we don't want to just describe the problem, folks. After the break, we're going to want to talk about God's proven ways out of the grip of negative emotions.
One of my hopes for this show is that there is somebody sitting out there that does not even realize the type of stress that they're under, that they are under any stress. They've been living with it for so long. This next segment is going to give them tools to be able to look at, to recognize, and why it is so important for them to get out of where they are.
And one of the ways we see what we've been under is by contrast. So allow the beautiful words of this song, the mercy of the Son, to wash over you and bring you into a peace by which you'll have a better opportunity to see maybe what you've been living with all along, and take it by contrast and know that the Lord wants to bring us into that place of peace that hopefully you're going to enjoy as Cecilia sings about God's mercy.